U.S. President Donald Trump announces he's raising tariffs on Chinese goods to 125% with immediate effect. Trump says it's based on Beijing's lack of respect to the world's markets, adding its trade practices are not sustainable. While singling out Beijing for punishment, Trump also authorized a 90-day pause on so-called reciprocal tariffs, lowering them to a universal 10% baseline. The White House says this is to allow negotiations with countries willing to make a deal.
Is President Donald Trump's decision to raise tariffs on Chinese imports to a staggering 125% a strategic maneuver to solidify America's economic position? Or is it a dangerous escalation in an already volatile trade war? On April 9, 2025, President Trump took the bold step of increasing tariffs on Chinese goods to 125%, a significant jump from previous levels. This decision marks a dramatic shift in U.S. China relations and adds fuel to the ongoing trade war that has already shaken global economies for years. Tariffs are taxes imposed on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive to encourage consumers to buy domestic goods. This move has sparked debates, as economists and political analysts wonder whether it will truly benefit the U.S. or worsen existing trade tensions. The move, however, escalates tensions that began with Trump's earlier tariffs during his first term in office, which focused on addressing the growing U.S. trade deficit with China and concerns over intellectual property theft and other trade imbalances. The 125% tariff, which targets a wide range of Chinese imports, has the potential to disrupt the already fragile global supply chain and drive up costs for U.S. consumers. While the rationale behind the tariff increase is largely economic, with Trump emphasizing the need to level the playing field, the potential consequences are multifaceted. It's important to consider that while the tariffs may pressure China to negotiate, they could also harm U.S. consumers, businesses, and the economy, which is already grappling with inflation. The trade war, which began in 2018, started with smaller tariffs on specific goods. But as tensions rose, both countries exchanged retaliatory tariffs, harming businesses and consumers. With the U.S. aiming to address issues like unfair trade, forced technology transfers, and China's state-backed industrial policies, Trump's strategy has been to use tariffs as economic leverage. But what does raising tariffs to 125% mean in practice? Such a sharp increase is unprecedented. It would make Chinese goods far more expensive in the U.S., likely leading to higher prices for electronics, textiles, and other staples, severely impacting American households. Companies that rely on Chinese manufacturing, like Apple and other major tech companies, could see their production costs skyrocket, potentially passing those costs on to consumers. Similarly, smaller businesses, especially those in the retail sector, could be severely affected by price hikes in everyday goods. This would lead to inflationary pressures, which could harm American consumers who are already grappling with rising living costs. Furthermore, small businesses would face the brunt of these tariffs, as they are often less equipped to absorb the rising production costs. Additionally, industries that rely on Chinese imports for their raw materials or finished goods, such as the automotive or textile industries, could see disruptions that ripple through the economy. If China follows through with its retaliatory measures, it could plunge U.S. farmers into deeper financial strain, compounding the difficulties many are already facing due to global market fluctuations and supply chain disruptions. Moreover, global markets would likely feel the aftershocks. Global supply chains have already been significantly disrupted due to the pandemic and previous trade actions. A major escalation in U.S.-China trade tensions could lead to an even greater economic slowdown worldwide. If companies are forced to shift their supply chains away from China, production costs could rise across the board, and it would further disrupt the delicate balance of international trade. Rising costs of goods could become the new normal as businesses adjust to this trade war. This could cause ripple effects that would be felt in Europe, Latin America, and beyond. The timing of this move is concerning, as many countries are still grappling with the long-term economic impacts of the pandemic. These tariff hikes could trigger a global recession if other countries join in retaliatory actions, affecting both developing and developed economies. Additionally, rising tariffs could intensify the push toward protectionist policies around the world, causing more nations to adopt isolationist economic strategies that limit trade and hamper economic growth. Multinational companies might face the daunting task of navigating increasingly complex trade routes, as tariffs make the cost of doing business internationally more expensive and unpredictable. On the domestic front, Trump's decision to impose a 125% tariff comes amidst ongoing debates about America's place in the world and its economic future. While the president argues that these measures are necessary to protect American jobs, industries, and intellectual property, many critics question the effectiveness of such a harsh approach. For years, economists have warned that tariffs often harm the very industries they are meant to protect by increasing costs and reducing market access. For example, American manufacturers who rely on Chinese parts or materials could see their production costs increase dramatically. A significant increase in tariffs could force companies to reconsider their production strategies, potentially leading to a reduction in competitiveness. This would reduce their profitability and could even lead to layoffs, a scenario that would be politically damaging for Trump's administration, especially in swing states where manufacturing jobs are critical. Some analysts argue that while tariffs may bring short-term political gains by appealing to certain voter bases, they are unlikely to deliver the long-term benefits Trump has promised. The central argument is that tariffs are a blunt instrument in a complex global economy. Rather than fostering a fairer trade environment, they often trigger trade wars, disrupt global markets, and result in higher costs for consumers and businesses alike. The strategy might ultimately backfire if it leads to rising unemployment and higher costs for consumers. In response to global backlash, Trump's administration has also announced a 90-day pause on tariff increases for many other countries in an apparent attempt to mitigate the broader global economic fallout. This move, while aimed at easing tensions with U.S. allies, underscores the complicated balancing act that the Trump administration faces as it seeks to protect American industries while maintaining relations with key trading partners. The suspension of tariffs for other nations signals a willingness to negotiate, but it also highlights the political and economic risks of the administration's broader trade strategy. The temporary reprieve is unlikely to quell the growing concerns surrounding long-term effects of the trade war on global stability. If these tariffs are not reduced or eliminated after the 90-day period, U.S. allies may respond with their own protectionist measures, potentially leading to a further fragmentation of global trade networks. So, what's next for the U.S.-China trade war in the global economy? The 125% tariff increase could mark a decisive turning point, but it could also be a calculated gamble that backfires. As markets react to these announcements, investors are likely to be on edge, and businesses will need to assess how the tariff hikes will affect their supply chains and profitability. In particular, financial markets and major global corporations will need to adapt to the new, more uncertain international trade environment. In the short term, American consumers may face higher prices for everyday goods, while American farmers and manufacturers could see the effects of Chinese retaliation in the form of reduced exports and lost market access. The broader question remains: can the U.S. achieve its trade goals with China through such drastic measures, or will it lead to more economic pain for both sides? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the stakes are higher than ever. The future of global trade hangs in the balance, and President Trump's decision to raise tariffs to 125% could be the trigger for a new chapter in the ongoing trade war, one with far-reaching consequences.